We've got the video on, Councillor, so just waiting on Councillor Stockwell and we can get going.
Which councillor are we waiting on?
The late Brian Stockwell. Okay, we'll get the meeting underway. I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for your attendance, everyone, and thank you to our visitors tonight. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on this evening and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. That's the Gubbi Gubbi or Kabi Kabi people. There are no apologies, so we go on to confirmation of minutes, and I call for confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 21st of February. Moved Councillor Pardon, seconded Councillor Glasgow. I'll put that. All those in favour, thank you. The motion is carried. I assume you're voting in favour too, Councillor.
I'm sorry, yes.
Jackson.
And we now need the minutes of the special meeting held on the 7th of March to be received and confirmed. Moved Councillor Stockwell, seconded Councillor Jackson. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, thank you. That's carried. Okay, so we now go on to a consideration of committee recommendations, and we begin as always with the Planning and Environment Committee recommendations.
Excuse me, Mr. Yes.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mayoral minutes, petitions all come before that.
Yeah. I want to get to the end. Okay, I call for petitions. Thanks.
You've got one tonight.
I'm going first, am I? I've got to find it now. Here we are. I have a petition from the Sunshine Beach Village Traders advising that they're committed to the installation of tree lighting in the village there of Sunshine Beach, and there's a couple of pages of signatures, plus there's additional information which has already been passed on to staff. So I'd like to move that this be accepted by the CEO and dealt with as appropriately.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Seconded Councillor Jurizovic. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Any more petitions?
Oh, yes.
There we go.
Yes, I have a petition which has been presented by the Sunrise Beach Glossy Black, Team Glossy Sunrise. And it is about concerning the Sunrise Beach Glossy Black Cockatoos habitat being now under threat. And I'll just read a bit of the petition to you. An application of high-density residential aged care facility and retirement village was submitted in 2008 and was approved and extended by Noosa Council in 2017. The conditions require Blue Care to identify food trees for propagation. Expert advise there's no evidence of environmental offsets work for glossies, and any regrowth, if successful, will not provide food for birds for at least 7 years. This development has come as a shock to our community. There's a small window of opportunity to act, and at minimum we are asking Uniting Church, Blue Care, to retain and protect our Sunrise Glossy Black Cockatoos in Wallen. We're asking Noosa Council to support them in this. Please listen to the community passionate about our unique environment, and 1, consider land swap options. 2, do not clear fell the site but retain the majority of glossy food trees.
Councillor, you're well over your 1 minute that's allowed in standing orders for a presentation of a petition, so get to the end.
I'll finish. I've just got 3, work with Glossy Team Sunrise members and other experts to rethink and adapt to the development. 4, protect the Glossy drinking creek. And 5, work with Noosa Council and locals to mitigate traffic impact. Thank you. And I present this to the CEO.
Seconded Councillor Pardon. Councillors, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion's carried. I assume you're voting in favour of
Yes, I am.
just for the sake of those watching that process, under our standing orders, if a petition is tabled at an ordinary meeting, we can only deal with it by moving that it be presented and received by their CEO for delegation to staff for appropriate action. Okay. There are no notified motions, Councillor Jurizovic. So we'll move on to the Planning and Environment Committee recommendations. And the first one is a development application for material change of use for a gym at 4 Project Avenue, Noosaville. Item number 2 was referred to the General Committee, so we'll deal with it later. Item number 3 is a request to change an existing approval for a garden centre, retail business type 7 at 101 and 105 Eumundi, Noosa Road, Noosaville. Item number 4 was referred to the General Committee. Item number 5 was referred to General Committee. Item 6 referred and 7 referred to the General Committee. So the recommendation is that the Planning and Environment Committee recommendations dated 12th of March be adopted except where dealt with or held over. Moved Councillor Stockwell, seconded Councillor Jackson. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. Thank you. That's carried. We go to the Services and Organisation Committee recommendations. Item number 1 is a proposed transfer of Noosaville Slipway lease at 4 Mill Street, Noosaville. Item number 2 is the Boreen Point Campground proposed management agreement extension. Item number 3 was referred to the General Committee and will be dealt with later. Item number 4 is the change of venue for council meetings for 2019. Item 5 is financial assistance grants. Item 6 is the regional facilities plan for difficult to locate sports. Item 7 is the January rate levy overview. Item number 8 is the Noosa Spit shoreline erosion update for February. Item number 9 is the Noosa Aquatic Centre half-yearly report. Item 10, the J and Bicentennial Community Centre half-yearly report. 11 is the Noosa Leisure Centre half-yearly report. 12, the Noosa Community Support half-yearly report.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Jurizovic, seconded Councillor Glasgow. The recommendation is that the Services and Organisation Committee recommendations dated 12th of March be adopted, except where dealt with or held over by separate resolution. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. Thank you. The motion's carried. Now we go on to the interesting ones. First up is the General Committee recommendation in relation to a change for an existing approval for a retirement centre and commercial business, medical and wellbeing, health and reconfiguring a lot at Grasstree Court Bend, Lexcen Drive, Sunrise Beach, otherwise known as Blue Care Development at Boreen. Now there is no recommendation in the agenda, so would someone care to move that the recommendation from the Environment and Planning Committee agenda on page 12 be moved?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Glasgow, seconded Councillor Pardon. Councillor Glasgow, do you wish to speak to this?
No.
Does anyone wish to speak to this?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Certainly, Councillor.
As we didn't speak to it previously, as we deferred the motion, this approval has been made quite a number of years ago by a previous council, and we've basically inherited it because simply it exists as it has already been approved. I do appreciate that many in the community, including the dedicated Glossy team Sunrise, are concerned about the impact on Glossy black cockatoos. I do understand that Blue Care people have met with Glossy team Sunrise people and have taken some steps to respond, while at the same time continuing to build a very necessary aged care facility and retirement village for Noosa's ageing community. I have been satisfied to find that there are some new conditions and some additional helpful ways of reducing removal of trees in the current change application. I do understand that there's a feeling that it's not enough from the point of view of community. At the same time, it's always a fine balancing act for us councillors. Noosa needs more aged care facilities and more retirement homes. Our own housing needs report, which was prepared by a consultant for the purpose of the Noosa plan, identified that even with all the currently approved, including Blue Care, aged care facilities, there would still be a need for 261 aged care beds in the Noosa Shire by 2026. And also, there is a higher demand because of our higher than average elderly population for retirement village units and apartments because of Noosa's aging population. So I do understand the need for this facility. I also understand from all the research done by council that the new Noosa plan has been searching for locations that might be appropriate, and there are very few parcels of land that are appropriate for this sort of development. Most of them are too small. One lot here, one lot there. It's very hard to find something that will work as a group, but nevertheless we've inherited this one. It's not a new one. As a councillor, it is my strong wish that the conversation between Blue Care and the Glossy Team Sunrise continue with goodwill through the development process, and that steps can be taken to protect bird habitat wherever possible, while at the same time constructing these much needed facilities. Sometimes it's really hard to find perfect solutions, but ongoing discussion can help get the best possible outcomes. And I'm keen to see the conversation continue to try to find outcomes that will at least meet both needs. And I'd be most happy to assist with these conferences. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Just a
Question.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Question, Mr. Chairman. Question for Kerry. Kerry, I understand as part of the operational works that a condition has been requested that other cockatoo feed trees in the area be identified. Is that? Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, we've had some discussions with the applicant about their operational works plans, and there's an agreement for them to provide some planting of the glossy feedback food trees as part of street tree planting in the area. So that's agreed to. And also the applicant is looking at their construction management plan through the operational works process to ensure they address safe passage for children through the area during construction, recognising there's a number of children who walk to school through that area. So they'll need to ensure that that is catered for.
Sorry, yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, I understand that was an expansion on existing conditions that Councillor Stockwell spoke to on Monday that helped to address some concerns from the community. My question goes to a condition that the applicant map cockatoo feed trees in the wider nature refuge that adjacent to the site. That was my understanding after talking to the Environment Officer and Town Planning. You can take that question on notice if... Yeah,
I probably can't expand a lot more on that tonight. You'll have to talk with our ecologist. But there is that work underway by the applicant. They do intend to do that work.
Would you care, for the sake of people in the gallery who are interested in this issue, just briefly, please, Kerry, talk to the process for an op works and how that gets determined?
So the operational works application is an application that follows the initial approval being the material change of use, which has already been given. So the operational works application is the detailed design works, including roads, access and stormwater. So it includes the detailed engineering plans, but it also includes the detailed landscaping requirements for the site, the detail around the rehabilitation required and the replanting of glossy feedback trees. So it's more detailed plans that get down to exactly where those trees will be planted and how that's undertaken.
Thank you. Councillor Jerusalem.
Mr. Chair.
Just a second. Councillor Pardon, did you have a question? Because you stood at the same time as Councillor
Oh,
Wilson.
sorry, yeah, no, it was answered, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Jerusalem.
Yeah, just in relation to where this matter was left on at Monday's meeting, and I guess it's part of the reason why there was no recommendation going forward. There were two matters with regard to conditions that Councillor Stockwell brought forward that were part of that motion, and I'm not sure where they are here, and the alternative of those conditions being part of operational works going forward. Can you advise whether we still have the conditions in here, whether they were operational works, and what the result of the discussion on Monday in regard to those two conditions is, please?
Sure. So Councillor Stockwell asked for some amendments to the conditions for the material change of use to include a requirement for street tree planting to be the glossy black food trees, as well as expanding on the and detailing, not necessarily expanding, but detailing the construction management plan requirements around the site. So at General Committee, it was agreed that officers would ask the applicant whether they were agreeable to those changes. And the answer is yes. They have advised officers that they are agreeable to those changes and more than happy to do them and do them through the operational works application process.
And they're not included in the recommendation.
So they don't form part of that recommendation that will flow through into the operational works applications.
Thank you. So that addresses the concerns that the Mayor had at the meeting with regard to a change of conditions after conditions have been approved, and operational works are probably the more appropriate means for dealing with traffic management and those street tree plantings.
That's right. Council's ability to revisit this approval is limited by the planning legislation. We can only make changes to the condition that respond to the changes that they've proposed. So those street tree and the construction management plans do not respond directly to those changes being proposed. But they can be addressed through the operational works applications, and that's something the applicant has agreed to.
Thank you. That addresses where we left the matter on Monday. Thank you. And what we're actually voting for today.
Now, Councillor Glasgow, it's been brought to my attention there's a typo in the original recommendation from the committee meeting, and that typo has been altered. I take it you have no problem with that?
Absolutely fine with me.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Wilkie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As has been explained, the decision before us tonight is whether we approve a minor change to the approved application that would, in effect, enable an extra stand of glossy black feed trees to be retained on the site. We cannot revisit the original application, which is prior approval. This change application is here after a council officer and members of the Glossy Team Sunrise have had contact with Blue Care last year to discuss concerns about the aged care home's impact on glossy black cockatoo feed trees, and the owner has responded with an amended layout which preserves another stand of feed trees while enabling them to still create a viable aged care home on their land. It's a shame to lose any tree, let alone identified glossy black feed trees. And if this particular site was the only one containing feed trees in Sunshine Beach, Sunrise, or the entire coastal plain, then it would be a tragedy of an even greater magnitude. This privately owned land adjoins a much larger parcel of similar vegetation set aside as a nature refuge, which an environmental officer has confirmed also contains feed trees. We're hoping for a more detailed mapping of existing feed trees in the adjoining nature refuge as part of the operational works. The property owner, whose aged care facility will help address a clearly identified and very important need, as explained by Councillor Jackson, in our community, and they've agreed and been conditioned to propagate and replant each feed tree at a ratio of 8:1 and replicate the entire habitat displaced by the aged care home's footprint on nearby land. The staff are to be commended on their work on this, as has the Glossy Team Sunrise's advocacy, and it's great to see so much passion and enthusiasm for this sort of work. And I commend them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pardon.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. C and I come from the old council who sort of set this up, if you like, sold the land to Blue Care, the church, to build this facility on, way back in about 2006-07. But when we did that, it was part of a Girraween master plan. There was a master plan set up for this area, and there was another 100 plus, about 140 acres, as well as this particular block, that was zoned for community purposes. So in other words, the 140 acres is stripped right along behind those houses. The southern strip of this block could have been developed for community purposes. Now we took that opportunity away. We kept that one block and we sold it for this purpose. So I just think people need to look at history a bit. Councils are easy but beat up for what they do. But as Councillor Jackson summed it up very well, trying to strike that balance between looking after the people and nature, and it's never easy. The other thing we did when we built Ely Creek Stage 3, we actually pushed the road reserve a bit south to save, from memory, about 17 glossy black trees that are still there today. I understand, but Councillor Jerusalem could talk for himself, but through some of the bush care groups, they've been replanting and planting these style of trees as well over many years. So there would be some more mature ones out there. So I thank staff, and I think we've gone the extra mile to try and strike that balance. Will everyone be happy? Absolutely not. But for me, I'm comfortable with our decision, and I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Drewsbeck.
Look, leading on from the point that Councillor Pardon raises, yes, there has been some significant plantings in the area in and around this development for many years. Council's been involved with the Sunshine Beach State High School while I was the P&C president there in 5 years worth of National Tree Day plantings, which included a number of glossy black feed cockatoos. It was one of the focuses of the National Tree Planting Days in that area. So there are significant elements of regrowth occurring not only in the school grounds but in and around the grounds itself, and also at the moment there is the Heathland Drive or Noosa regeneration project that many volunteers are undertaking, and a number of glossy black feed cockatoo feed tree put your teeth are also included in there. So whilst there may be a loss of elements of habitat and a time for the new feed trees to grow, there are a number of feed trees already in cycle and in sync to try and generate growth over the next 5 to 7 years that will become well-established feed trees for those birds.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, it's not often I have cause to quote Cher, but in 1987 she's saying, if I could turn back time. And if I could turn back time, I'd be refusing this for sure. It's in an ecosystem that's only got 300 hectares left in the world. It's endangered by biodiversity status, and it's going to be developed in a way that will make sure that this part of that ecosystem will be lost. It's a hard fact, but that's the way it is. The planning law says it's got an approval from 2004. We're not in 2004. So we can't do much about that. What we can do is, as we have done through the conditions, do as good as we can to get an outcome that maximises conservation to the greatest possible extent. And over the last few months, understanding the concern in the community, I've done a little bit of research and identified that this ecosystem also occurs on Stradbroke Island, and they have been successfully rehabilitating it for many decades. And the latest research has been provided to staff, which says one of the best ways to rehabilitate this type of ecosystem is to collect all the topsoil, keep it fresh, and put it on the new site, and you'll get both the seed source but all the mycorrhizal and all the other associations of soil to help recreate the ecosystem where the topsoil came from. We've got a site in mind which is in the nature refuge area and is previously a sand mine site. It's going to be a difficult site to rehabilitate. It's not going to be easy, but if we use good science and good approach, there will be some offsetting. Offsetting is a horrible term. It is at the bottom of the mitigation hierarchy. It's what you do as a strategy of last resort. The top resort is protected, but that's what we've got in front of us, the opportunity to offset. We have got a range of other opportunities, and I think the one good thing that comes out of this is a greater awareness that the people of Sunrise Beach live in the habitat of an endangered or threatened species. And anyone who's lived there knows that they don't just occur in the native bush. You can see them on the footpaths, and that's why I suggested that we do ask on this occasion that they plant the other Casuarina literalis on the footpath, but I also think more broadly, as the ecologist suggested, that it can become the street tree for Sunrise Beach in appropriate locations. So that while habitat is really important and the mix of species is really important, it's also important to help the recovery of a vulnerable species. So while if it was 2004, I'd be voting for refusal, tonight I'll be accepting the outcome in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor. Very briefly, I appreciate the frustration of both members of the community and a number of councillors, perhaps all of us, with regard to our inability to be able to revisit conditions on a historic approval here. Thus, we can only deal with the minor changes that are before us. In discussion with residents out in front before the meeting, I made a commitment, and that commitment is that tomorrow I will write to the applicant asking the applicant if they would be willing to consider any further opportunities to be able to preserve glossy black food trees and or the water hole that's being used by the birds on the site in terms of a further application for change, noting that council is happy to discuss opportunities with them. So I will do that tomorrow, but of course I support the motion because we're pretty much locked into what we can deal with here. Thank you. Councillor Glasgow.
Close?
Close.
I will close. I'd just like to say I think I am the only one who went to Sunshine Beach State High School for 5 years and saw those funny black cockatoos flying over the radar. And I'd just like to big thank you to the staff and my fellow councillor Stockwell over here. This is how you can work in unity with developers and a balanced approach in making something work. That's a tricky decision, and I appreciate exactly what the community is doing here, and I also appreciate what the DA is coming back in 2004, and like Councillor Stockwell said back then, it wouldn't have floated, but right now it does, and I really am proud of the decision we've made right now, and hopefully in 10 years, we'll say, 20 years, we can have this, and we'll see them still flourishing over the, probably won't be at high school then, you might be, but we'll still see them flying over the high school, so thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion, all those in favour. Thank you, the motion's carried. We go back to the General Committee recommendations. Item number 2 relates to the backpackers at 14 to 16 Mary Street, and that's subject to a further report which we'll deal with later. Item number 3 is the Koala Conservation Action Plan update. Item number 4 is the procurement outcome for Fishing Futures Consultancy. Item number 5 is Noosa Biosphere Reserve Foundation Annual Report. Item 6 is proposed expression of interest for community activation of the top floor Peregian Beach Surf Club.
Mr. Chair, I have a alternate motion to propose. Oops,
Do we have it?
Can I second it?
it's coming.
Have we seen
This hasn't been disseminated to councillors previously, obviously.
No, as you know, I was caught up with glossy black cockatoos.
I know how that can happen.
Are you going to copy it in, or do you want me to just? Yeah.
Can I suggest the best way from a process point of view, if
Just
this is what's been moved, where we copy it into the minutes on the board and then read it out. It's a big
Read it
deal
out
watching
after it's been copied.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Get it copied across first.
Thank you.
It looks to me this isn't an alternative motion, but rather a procedural motion.
Okay, it probably is a procedural motion.
But it can be moved
It's a
at this point.
deferral.
It's a deferral.
But it can be moved at this point.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we get a moment to read?
Second.
And I'll read it. I'll read it out loud.
Seconded, Councillor Glasgow.
Okay. I'll read it out loud.
Thank you.
So yes, it's a deferral motion. Regarding the Peregian Beach Surf Club, I'm moving that we defer consideration of proceeding to an expression of interest process to identify a local community group to offer a permit to occupy for level 1 of the building to the next round of meetings to allow council to obtain and consider legal advice regarding the legality of offering a trustee permit for non-surf life-saving purposes. Given the site is on state land, is gazetted reserved for local government surf life-saving purposes with council as trustee.
Thank you. I've got a question for staff. I recognise that you haven't spoken to the motion yet. Michael, can you please tell us whether or not discussions have already occurred with the state with regard to the EOI process and the intentions of the EOI process?
Yeah, staff have consulted with the NRM regarding the EOI process. The NRM just reiterated that they don't oppose the process, however, any use must align with the purpose.
Wish to speak to the motion?
I do wish to speak. Councillors, as you know, I strongly believe council should only make decisions on the basis of having full information. In this case, where the gazetted use of the site is for surf life-saving, whereas the recommended proposal to go to expression of interest is not necessarily for surf life-saving, I feel that there is a legal question to be understood and that we need clarity by having legal advice about whether in fact it is reasonable to go forward with an expression of interest for other uses other than surf life saving. I actually think it would be an amazing waste of everybody's time to carry out an EOI and then for people to make submissions which take many days and many hours of writing, and then to find that some of these submissions are considered lawfully illegal. So I think the best approach is to make sure we know where we are legally and then make a decision about whether it's appropriate to go to an EOI.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Pardon?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I won't support the motion. I spent quite considerable time on the phone today, actually talking to a legal with regards to this motion today. I then, as you do, spoke to my staff to make sure that we're on solid ground. We heard on Monday there's already some clubs, you know, multi-purpose, multi-use, and I'm not saying this club will end up that way at all. But what I am saying is I either trust my staff with regards to the advice I get about legalities, or I defer and wait to get this, I would imagine, much the same information. So for those reasons, I can't support the deferral.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Wilkie?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I appreciate what Councillor Jackson is trying to do, but our professional staff have sought and received advice from the landowner, the Department of Natural Resources and Mines, and been advised that such a process could take place, can take place. We're not jumping to any conclusion here about who will be awarded the permit at the end in the final analysis. And as came up in our discussions on Monday, there is a bit of latitude about what constitutes life-saving purposes, given that uses in surf clubs across Queensland also involve poker machines and bars, which strictly are, in a legal sense, not life-saving uses or purposes. So it indicates that there is some latitude in the interpretation applied to the legislation by the landholder, which staff are obviously very comfortable with and have been advised such by DNRM. The community down in Peregian has been waiting 5 years for some clarity on this issue. There's a lot of goodwill and but also angst on all sides of the argument. So far we haven't been able to clarify the uses for the building, except one thing is certain: we do know, as articulated in the original motion, is that SLSQ, Surf Life Saving Queensland, will be, and surf life saving activities will be taking place from the ground floor, and that includes the newly established Peregian nippers, and that also, as discussed on Monday, that nippers can take place upstairs as well as needs be, and that can be a condition of the permit. But I urge councillors to move quickly to an EOI process without any deferral, so we can undertake a transparent, open and efficient process to give the community some much needed clarity on this this issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Glasgow?
I will support the motion because, like my fellow colleague, this is zoned for a surf life saving use. And I'm just getting sick of hearing about poker machines and tabs not supporting the function of a surf life saving. The Taunton Golf Club, as I went there today, has numerous poker machines. It has nothing to do with the art of hitting a stupid ball down the middle of a drive, down the middle of a fairway. Yet it supports the function of the club staying open for the members to enjoy. So if this place had whatever amount of poker machines, it wouldn't matter. But the bottom line is, it's a life-saving function. It should be open to the public as soon as it possibly can, whether it's got poker machines or not. It's going to support the function of supporting downstairs, which I actually believe is called the Supporters Club downstairs of a life-saving community. So I support the motion totally, and I would rather see nothing more than this top story at the surf club other than a life-saving type business.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jerusalem.
Yeah, I won't be supporting the motion purely and simply because of the fact that Part A of the motion that was before us, before the this change, says to proceed to an expression of interest process to identify a local community group to offer a permit to occupy for level 1 as detailed in the report. Now I go back to the report. Point 4 of the report refers to new expressions of interest process, and I look through the dot points, and the dot point clearly states community use must complement, align with the gazetted reserve purpose, local government reserve for life saving. So I think the body of the report covers the issues that Councillor Jackson is trying to raise in this motion. I think it's clearly stated that any expression of interest must already align with those purposes, and it's clear for the community going forward. Happy to look at legal advice further down the line if and when purpose is sought or found, and if legal advice is needed to consider it then. But at this point in time, as it's only an expression of interest, and this does not confine council to a decision of any sort at this point in time, I can't support the motion in front of us. One of the things to remember with regard to some of the points that Councillor Glasgow raised is that many of the activities in many surf life-saving clubs at the moment already challenge the uses of life-saving purposes within the bounds of the buildings which they occupy.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the procedural motion. I know you don't like the words poker machines, Councillor Glasgow, so I'll use the word yoga instead. At the moment, the building's being used for yoga in support of the surf life-saving services downstairs, and I would argue that yoga isn't necessarily an automatic alignment with surf life-saving purposes. So I think that the point that Councillor Wilkie was attempting to make, that there are some flexibilities here and that the state understands those flexibilities are necessary for a club to be able to flourish, is fairly evident. And indeed, it goes to the discussion staff have already had with the state in this regard, and the fact that before we offer a permit, we will be going back to the state. The suggestion that it's a waste of time for community groups to put in an application to or submission to the EOI process, I don't see it as that. The conditions that they have to adhere to are clear in the report, and as Councillor Jerusalem noted, it has to align with the gazetted purpose. However, what I do believe it is an opportunity for various community groups to be able to offer up their proposals, their ideals for use of the space, and denying them that opportunity is less democratic than offering them the opportunity. So I would prefer that as many groups as choose to are given the opportunity to give their council what they believe to be the ideal use for the building. And that's the purpose of the EOI process. And of course, as Councillor Jerusalem noted, the EOI process does not commit council to any particular decision at the end, but what it does offer is an opportunity to see all the opportunities on the table at once. Councillor Stock.
Yes, I too won't be supporting it. Slightly different reasons. I understand the logic of not wanting to put a whole lot of people through an expressions of interest process if they come up with uses that are inconsistent with the nature of the reserve to a point where they wouldn't be able to be approved under the Land Act. And that may save them some time. I'm sure that staff can put out guidance as to what the requirements are under the Land Act and the secondary use of reserved lands. And I don't think we need any more legal advice, because certainly a couple of years ago we got very specific legal advice about what that policy means in terms of the secondary use of trust land and the difference between commercial use and not-for-profit use. So we already have legal advice about how to handle ancillary or secondary use of trust land. So to me, if we do need legal advice, it'll come at a time when we have specific expressions of interest. If staff are not clear on whether one particular proposal that may have certain merit, whether that is going to be acceptable. And if there is unclarity, lack of clarity, once we've talked to the landowner, the Department of Natural Resources, then we may wish to get legal opinion at that time. But at this stage, I think it actually would be a waste of ratepayers' money to get legal advice without having any specific options to put in front of that particular legal advisor.
Thank you, Councillor. You wish to close, Councillor Jackson?
Yes, I certainly do. I will respond as a right of reply to each individual. But Councillor Stockwell has referred to, we already have legal advice about the difference between not-for-profit and commercial use. In no way does having a surf club operating in a surf life-saving building imply commercial use. Perhaps Councillor Stockwell has forgotten that surf life-saving is also a not-for-profit activity, and the only reason to have something where money is earned is to support the surf life-saving activity. Councillor Wellington referred to, it's more democratic to do an EOI, but you know what? Every time we have an opinion, we can claim that our opinion is more democratic, so I can't buy that one. I actually think it's probably more democratic to make sure we get the right information before moving forward and making decisions, as we are the elected representatives. Councillor Wilkie very conveniently referred to pokies and bars as the way that the surf life clubs are used to using the upstairs. This afternoon, I very specifically spoke to the president of the Surf Life Saving of Queensland, and I put to him that we were concerned about the use of poker machines. He made it very clear to me that that would not be the intent, and that they had no intention of putting poker machines into this building. And Councillor Pardon spoke of having spoken to a legal. I'd like to see something in writing from a legal, Councillor Pardon. I do not go on having heard words about having spoken to a legal. That is not legal advice. You talked about your staff, my staff. They're all our staff, and our staff are not lawyers, and I do appreciate all the work our staff do, but we can't attribute to them the ability to give legal advice when they're not lawyers. So I can't accept what you were saying there. I'm very strongly of the view that we should be very clear on what this surf life-saving purpose is meant to be, and to make sure that we're not putting forward an EOI that causes people a lot of trouble when really they possibly can't lawfully do what's being proposed. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Oh, my.
All those against? The motion is lost. I'm going to move a slight alteration to the motion that's in the agenda, folks. In part C, after the words staff formally invite SLSQ, I'm including the word Sunshine Coast Branch. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Seconder, Councillor Glasgow, you do surprise me sometimes. I'm going to read it out. Yeah,
it might be a good idea to read it.
Yep. So the motion before us is that Council note the report by the Property Advisor to Services and Organisation Committee meeting dated 12th of March 2019 regarding the Peregian Beach Surf Club building, and A, agree to proceed to an expression of interest EOI process to identify a local community group to offer a permit to occupy for level 1 of the building as detailed in the report. B, note that the EOI process will allow Council to consider appropriate available options for the facility and does not commit Council to entering into any future permits without a further decision by Council. And C, note the recent correspondence direct to councillors from the Acting Chief Executive Officer of Surf Lifesaving Queensland, SLSQ, seeking full use of the building, and request that staff formally invite SLSQ Sunshine Coast Branch to submit a proposal for community activation of level 1 of the building to allow consideration as part of the proposed EOI process. Councillors, I think that the EOI process is the best and fairest way that we can approach consideration of the ongoing use of the top floor of the Peregian Surf Club. And the reason for that is that there have been a range of options presented to councillors and to staff by various community groups over a considerable period of time, and some are getting more fervent, I have to say. So this opportunity now is before us to be able to finally bring that whole argy-bargy, if you like, discussion and idealism about the use of the building to a formal end. I confirmed that I had a meeting with SLSQ representatives today, and they confirmed that they will be making a recommendation to SLSQ Sunshine Coast branch to participate in the EOI process. So we know they're going to put their position, and we know that their position will be that they believe that in order to progress a opportunity for a locally based, Peregian-based surf lifesaving club, they believe that the best opportunity for that is for them to be able to control the entire building, and they'll be putting in that recommendation. However, what we will then have is that recommendation and their detailed argument to compare with the other community groups that may or may not put in an EOI. We might find that just the SLSQ do in the end. It remains to be seen. Look, it's my hope though that this will draw a firm line under the process, and what it will do, I believe, is give us an opportunity to make a decision that takes into account the best community benefit for the use of the building. Council's desire, and it is our desire along with SLSQ's, to see a Peregian-based local surf club arise, and that takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. And also, it will give us an opportunity to consider activation of a building in order for it to meet its land use purpose from the point of view of the landowner, that being the state. I'd just like to say in conclusion, I want to acknowledge the significant work that Noosa Head Surf Lifesaving Club have put in over the last 5 years, particularly towards maintaining volunteer lifesaving services on the beach on weekends during season. Also, they have reinvigorated the Nippers Club opportunities at Peregian. Furthermore, of course, they have actually spent money of their own on making alterations to the building, and they're to be commended for that. I also want to thank SLSQ, who last October, after discussions with Council, moved into a coordination role of the facility, and we were hoping that we could move from that into a situation where bridges were built between the various warring factions in the community, and we could move towards a standalone Peregian Surf Lifesaving Club. It's obviously not as simple as that, and that's why this opportunity now is before us, to be able to put on the table all their suggestions, all the recommendations, to weigh them up and work out what is the best path to move towards that ultimate goal of having a standalone Peregian Surf Lifesaving Club based in Peregian. Thank you. Councillor Glasgow.
My beloved mayor moved it, and beloved Councillor Glasgow seconded it for that exact reason. For those in the gallery who doesn't know, SLSQ stands for Surf Lifesaving Queensland. Our surf lifesaving function, exactly, to promote the business of surf lifesaving downstairs with the nippers, functions and so forth. And I also would like to give my congratulations to the Noosa Surf Club, who have put 5 years of hard time into this and money. So I fully support Councillor Wellington's motion on this, because as I said, it is a surf lifesaving function. That's all I want to see there.
Councillor Parton?
Yeah, just in amongst all this, if you look, council, we're the whipping boys in between various community groups, and that's the way it is, and we're used to that, I guess, to blame the government, and we are the local government, and that's fair enough. But
Councillor Glasgow's here.
Sorry,
that's all right. Go for it. I expect you back soon.
Yeah,
Councillor.
but just in amongst all this, council, if things fell over here, it'd be Noosa Council that would step in to make sure that this Peregian club kept operating. It's Noosa Council that's looking at 90,000 for a new roof. It's Noosa Council that's looking to invest in annual money into this particular facility. So whilst various groups might beat us up, in the big picture, we won't let that club fail, and we won't let it fall down. And with regards to Councillor Glasgow, it is a surf lifesaving club. We all said it. The mayor summed it up brilliantly, and that's where most councillors' minds are. It was built by surf club members over many years, whatever reasons it's failed. But we have one mission as a council. We know what it is to get it up and functioning again, and it will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Stockwell?
Yeah, I will speak to the motion. I do support it. I think it's quite important to understand that when we talk about the nature and purpose of a reserve, that the dominant purpose is outlined in that gazettal notice for the reserve, but there is the flexibility to do uses that are allied or ancillary to it. In my dim dark past, I was a senior land planning officer, and I used to hear the appeals on reserves about inappropriate use. And then I got a bit of a promotion. I became the principal policy officer in this state, looking at land planning issues for the state land. And there is fairly clear and consistent guidelines about what's appropriate and what's not. And there is really good precedent in terms of when not-for-profits are appropriate and when pure commercial, or where there's commercial activities as part of a not-for-profit. What I would like to see come out of this expression of interest, however, is something larger. It's something larger for the surf life saving movement in Australia. Because what we're seeing now is, when I was a surf life saver in the 70s, upstairs was the beds, because you'd all drive down there. And then we've seen this growth into upstairs becoming just like any other club. And what we have the opportunity in Peregian is returning something that's quite new, and what we're seeing around Australia is this mixed use. That surf life saving is intermixed with other uses that adds value to the community so that we get a greater usage. And the primary use always has to be surf life saving, but through this process we'll look at the other potential uses that could be allied and ancillary to it.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Jackson?
Yes. I find it quite astounding to hear people speaking of their commitment to the Peregian Beach surf life saving, and then turning around and saying they'll do an AOI to see if other people might take over the upper story of the building. That's not supporting the future of surf life saving in Peregian Beach. In fact, the best way to support the development of a surf club is to support the surf club. I would like to read out, I will read out, the statement of Surf Life Saving Queensland, which was distributed to councillors this afternoon. Surf Life Saving met with several, I believe the mayor and perhaps some staff members this afternoon to discuss this topic, and they have written, Surf Life Saving Queensland clearly expressed today, our preferred position remains what was agreed with Noosa Shire Council and ourselves in our meeting last year. They attached a copy, and that copy describes the commitment by the then discussion to progress towards a longer-term lease in order to be able to develop the sustainability of a club. I'll read on the quotes. We discussed with the mayor and staff if council seek to pursue an EOI process, despite our representation, then we would endeavour to encourage the Sunshine Coast branch of SLSQ to put a lease proposal forward. We should be clear, however, that SLSQ and the branch have a strong desire to develop a sustainable, independent Peregian Beach Surf Life Saving Club, noting that without a long-term lease or control of the full clubhouse area, we have a strong view that this will severely compromise the capacity to provide a sustainable life-saving operation for the community of Peregian. We do note that without the operational and substantial financial support from Noosa Head's Surf Life Saving Club, that the present functions of surf life saving activities or the future activities could reasonably be expected to occur and would not be able to be delivered. I'm listening to that because I think that is certainly the position they have put. I am personally dedicated to seeing surf life saving continue on a sustainable basis in Peregian Beach. I have said before, I think the community is very well serviced with community house and a brand new community house about to be built by council for multi-million dollars. So we're doing so much for this community already. We have a building here which is in use, especially gazetted for surf life saving. And as far as I can see, the only way to develop a sustainable club, which means self-funded, is to have some ability for that club to use the upstairs both for earning some money, and they've made it clear to me it won't be pokies, and also for the many other uses that I understand it's being used for: training and assessment of lifesavers, nipper training, meetings, events, and fundraising. And yes, perhaps a bit of yoga for members so they can keep fit. So yeah, I am very supportive of that, and I'm also of the belief we should be seeking legal advice, which has been rejected by my fellow councillors. And for this reason, I will not be supporting this motion, and I call a division. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Jerusalem?
Methinks we forget why we are here and why this issue has come before us. Sure, we're looking at, and there's a bit of misunderstanding of what the permit or the expression of interest will do. We won't be seeking expressions of interest from the Peregian Beach Tiddlywinks Club or the hockey club or any other club that's not associated with surf lifesaving. The reason we're here is because we have more than one proposal being put to council over time from more than one interest group with regards to providing surf lifesaving activities and operations in the Peregian Beach area. Currently, it's an annex of Noosa Head Surf Lifesaving Club, and I've received many phone calls over the years from members from the Noosa Head Surf Lifesaving Club that they're unhappy with providing services down at Peregian and would like to see exactly what the intent is here. The local community and members of the local community at Peregian Beach patrolling their beach as volunteers, a successful nippers program, and we have had nippers come and go from this facility since the demise of Peregian Beach Surf Lifesaving Club originally. So it has succeeded. We've had another successful year this year, which is wonderful to see, but it has to be sustained, it has to be ongoing. And many people turn around and talk about the need for long-term commitment with regards to permits and all the like. But here we have a fledgling, the potential for a fledgling organisation to get up, and that fledgling organisation needs time to grow its wings and set that seed of success year in, year out to progress to a longer term vision and a longer term sustainability so that we don't see the demise of Peregian Beach Surf Club in the future. The fairest process that we can come across is the process before us here, to give all the entities that think they have the capability and capacity to deliver services for surf life saving in Peregian Beach and surf life saving activities that may be more than just surf life saving as it stands, which at the moment occupies that lower level, to come forward and tell us what they have in the way of vision going forward. It also, and one of the reasons I support the motion, is looking at towards the parent body, Surf Life Saving Queensland Sunshine Coast Branch, to have their input and ensure that going forward that the results that we get here and that come forward to council provide the best outcome that we can have for the long-term sustainable future of the Peregian Beach Surf Lifesaving Club. I've had a number of phone calls that have fear that that's not what this is going to deliver. But the only way we will find out is when those expressions of interest are being brought forward and we have a chance to assess them and look at them. So don't fear. Let's await and see what comes before us. Let's give the entities that believe they have the capacity and the capabilities the chance to put their cases forward and present them so that everybody has their opportunity equally and equitably to place their plans on the table, their visions on the table for the future success of this entity. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, please.
Yes, certainly.
Probably of Michael Shea. Thanks, Michael. There was an expression about nippers not always running and perhaps other things like that since 2014. Can you let us know how long the permits were for the use of the club premises since 2014?
Yeah, annual permits.
So is it possible that an annual permit makes it difficult to maintain sustainability of life-saving and nippers?
I can't answer that,
Okay,
unfortunately.
that's fine. Also, I'm a bit surprised to hear a statement, and I think more than one statement, that the expressions of interest will be for surf life saving. It is my understanding, and you may wish, can you please confirm, that the only entities that are allowed under the Australian Surf Lifesaving Association to operate as surf lifesaving are organizations that are recognized by that Australian-wide association as surf life-saving entities, and that I'm not clear actually how these other expressions of interest could possibly be surf life-saving entities, as I'm not aware of any others existing in Noosa. Yeah.
So sorry, the question.
Missed the question. Start again. Okay.
Try and abbreviate.
Abbreviate, shorter. If we're going to be calling for expressions of interest for the purposes of surf life-saving, yet in Australia, the only entities that can operate as surf life-saving clubs have to be recognized. Surf clubs have to be recognized by the Australian life-saving, so sorry, you know the word. Body, SLSQ. How is it that I'm hearing from councillors that there will be other expressions of interest for surf life-saving? I'm not aware of any other than the ones that already exist. I'm not aware of any other surf life-saving recognized organizations that could put in an expression of interest.
All I can answer is surf clubs need to be affiliated by Surf Lifesaving Queensland.
Yeah.
That's your question, wasn't it? I can't answer any of the other. If you're talking about what councillors' opinions are regarding the process, I can't answer that.
Of course. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, we find ourselves in this situation because there's been an unprecedented history of controversy and contention in Peregian. A 20-year lease may have been able to be issued 5 years ago if things had followed a smooth course down there. But we're not here because on a whim or because we want to take something away from the surf life-saving movement. It's fair to say that all parties down at Peregian wanted to see a sustainable surf club in Peregian and have been waiting 5 years for that to happen. There was enormous goodwill and high expectations when Noosa took over 5 years ago when the Peregian Club collapsed. There was enormous goodwill, there was invitations from the council to work hand in hand with planning staff, property staff and the community to create a village scale club on the existing site that we all could be proud of and be engaged in. But for whatever reason, there was we got somehow distracted from that. There was a proposal to build something on the dunes which distracted enormous resources. It divided the community. It took a lot of the council staff's time. There was repeated advice given in good faith that such an option would not be entertained. And I think it would be fair to say it would have distracted the resources of the surf life-saving movement, who perhaps would have wanted to get on with re-establishing nippers and a volunteer life-saving group there. But nevertheless, that's why we find ourselves dealing with SLSQ and not Noosa Head Surf Life-Saving Club, who would be in possession of a 20-year lease had things run smooth down there up to this point. Now, we've all made public commitments in this forum to open and transparent processes, and in this case, where there's been deeply divisive controversy and high competition for the upper level of this building, which operates life-saving services from downstairs, an open, fair, transparent expressions of interest process is the fairest, most transparent way to go. It's extraordinary circumstances, but this is why we find ourselves here. Now, there'll never be agreement over past history. The history down here is riven with controversy and division. What I'm hoping to do is, this process will deliver is a clarity about a way forward that can bring all parties together again. That's my hope. Perhaps idealistic, but we're getting closer to knowing what's possible and who's prepared to do the work to make this club function. Now, I would like to acknowledge, there are always positives in these stories, and I would like to acknowledge, as the Mayor did, the resources and time that Noosa Head Surf Life-Saving Club has dedicated to reactivating this club and making sure that there are lifesavers on the beach on a Saturday during the season, giving the volunteers an opportunity to get training, Also, they are funding lifeguards on the Sunday down there. And just the last season, I'd like to acknowledge the good work done by some Noosa Head Surf Club members who are very dedicated to Peregian, that being Brett Leckie, Robin Lee McCready, and Lyndon Furlong, who was the Nippers coordinator down there. These are very real contributions that have got the Nippers program up and running, and twice in the last fortnight I've seen the enthusiasm amongst the Nippers and the Nipper parents, and the excitement amongst the broader community that children are back on the beach, regardless of whether they're drawn from Peregian Springs, Coolum Ridges, Peregian Breeze, North and South Peregian. They want to be on that beach, and these parents want their children on Peregian Beach, and I think that's fantastic. And going forward, I'm sure I wouldn't be the only one who wants to dedicate resources to ensuring that good work continues down there. I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work of and interest shown by the local Peregian Beach Community Association and the Peregian Beach Surf Lifesaving Club, who brought the whole idea that this is very valuable community space. The community wants something fantastic to happen here. They want a sustainable surf club there. They want ocean-focused activities there, and they'll be happy that this thing will be brought to a head. There'll be some clarity, and we can all assess the validity and viability of the options that are presented. And hopefully, once the final decision is made, I expect there to be more debate. But I think all parties who are interested in the future of that surf club could feel that a fair process has been undertaken, and council has to step up sometimes and bring things to a head. If people are upset on all sides, I think that's a sign you got it right.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll exercise my right of reply. Councillor Jackson evidenced surprise that councils want to see a local Peregian Beach Surf Lifesaving Club, but that's always been our aim. I'm surprised that Councillor Jackson is surprised on this issue. It's always been our intention that the ultimate ideal was to see a rejuvenated, reinvigorated Peregian-based surf lifesaving club. Look, it's not just the SLSQ that might actually help facilitate that. It might be that a community group working with or without LSQ may facilitate it. Other groups can establish surf lifesaving clubs and become affiliated with SLSQ. What's more, once upon a time, of course, council ran the surf lifesaving, and council wasn't affiliated with SLSQ. In fact, I remember on the Sunshine Coast Council, former Councillor Russell Green will remember the angst that we went through in the transition from council-run lifeguards to commissioning SLSQ to provide professional lifesaving services on the beaches. There are various models, in other words. However, in truth, what we have here is an opportunity to see whether anyone else can potentially work with SLSQ. But more importantly, one of the reasons we're going through this process, and we wouldn't be going through it if it weren't for the fact that SLSQ, in our discussions last year, promised that they would dedicate time to building bridges between community groups and working towards developing a locally based surf club. And I'm sorry to say that they didn't follow through on that promise. And I know that they've had some significant staffing changes, and that may play into it. Nevertheless, unfortunately, we didn't feel that that was being progressed in any way. And that's why community groups were starting to get restless on this issue. So now we have an opportunity. It may well finish up that SLSQ are the logical and most straightforward applicants in the OI process to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And hopefully through this process, they will be reminded that what we want to achieve is finally a standalone Peregian Surf Lifesaving Club. So I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Yes. In favour are Councillors Wilkie, Stockwell. Is that hand up? Oh, Councillor Glasgow, thank you. Pardon, Jerusalem, Wellington. Those against? Councillor Jackson. The motion is carried. We move on. The next item recommended from the General Committee is item 7, which is the same as item 2 and is subject to a further report, so we'll deal with that in a moment. Number 8 is the financial performance report, And the recommendation is that the General Committee recommendations be adopted except where dealt with or held over. Councillor Pardon, I think, was to his feet first. Councillor Glasgow second. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Okay, so the final item on the agenda is the request for a negotiated decision motion for visitor accommodation being backpackers at 14 to 16 Mary Street, Noosaville. There's a subsequent report here, councillors. Just bringing your attention to the fact that staff have discussed this matter with the applicant, and it seems that the applicant is happy with the changes that are being recommended. Are there any questions for staff? Councillor Stockwell.
Yes. Can you explain where we're at in terms of the request at the Planning Environment Committee in terms of the potential change in conditions around external speakers?
Yes. So officers are not recommending that external speakers be permitted. Officers are suggesting the speakers remain indoors, and that is because our acoustic consultant says outdoor speakers are problematic, and in his experience they will cause ongoing issues for nearby residents. A motion, though, has been drafted for councillors at the request of the Planning Committee to permit the speakers outside, and that's conditions been worked up with our acoustic consultant to have an electronic noise limiter for those speakers to try and minimise those potential problems that he foresees.
Okay. And sorry, if Kathy, I think that is not the staff recommendation is
the requested motion, which is on page 17 of the agenda.
Yes.
Page 17 of the agenda.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm happy to move the
recommendation on page 15 or
the motion which allows the external speakers, which is, I believe, on page 17.
I'll second.
Yeah, certainly carry.
With
sorry, I just need to clarify there's one wording change that needs to be made, which is shown in red for condition 64.
That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, so that's been clarified that it needs to be measured at the nearest sensitive receptor, otherwise the noise requirements are too stringent. They wouldn't even allow a person to speak on site.
So what do you mean by the nearest sensitive receptor?
That's where the noise levels, a house next
door.
door.
So it's the nearest next door
neighbour.
house. Okay, not nearby the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Councillor Glasgow has a question.
So the applicant is 100% okay with all these new changes?
Yes, in discussions with the applicant, and I've had those discussions today, and he certainly brought those wording changes in red to my attention. So I understand he's sitting in the audience that yes, he's happy with them.
So you said two sentences, yes or no?
Let's say yes.
Councillor Stockwell, do you wish to talk to this?
It's just briefly, I believe the staff, I accept that this area is adjacent to a residential area. I believe as a site that has been identified in the planning scheme for this use, that we should adopt an outcomes based, and I understand that while it may be more difficult in terms of a compliance action, I do believe that the flexibility to have an internal system that has more speakers within the quadrangle of the pool area that are putting out quiet music, we can use the technology to make sure that doesn't increase any nuisance to the neighbours. So I think it's just a little bit of flexibility which will allow this enterprise, which I believe is a welcome addition to the tourism stock in Noosa. It's bringing a new form of hostel to Noosa, which is a little bit more upmarket, a little bit more controlled with the manager on site, so that it is less likely to affect the neighbouring properties, and I believe the conditions as in the recommendation will ensure that if it ever errs from that we have the ability to go on site and make sure that they change their ways.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Wilkie?
Question is, will it be council staff who'll be monitoring the sound, or will it be another body?
Kerry?
Can I just clarify, you mean in relation to condition 64?
Yes.
So in relation to condition 64, that would be come back to staff. So if there was a complaint around noise, there would be some noise readings required to be done. So, but the design of the building and the acoustic fencing and the windows are all designed to meet those requirements.
Okay.
So this is really a fallback position in case there is issues in the future.
Thank you.
I also ask a question. You mentioned the acoustic fencing and I think the windows being closed. Was there not also a condition added in November that there be some sort of measurement of noise machinery put or equipment put around the periphery?
That's exactly why it's changed, yes.
What changed?
That's correct. In November, when council initially decided it, the council made the decision with a requirement for a sound recording device at the perimeter. In the ordinary meeting to council, in the report to council to this meeting, the applicant has asked for that to be changed and to be deleted.
Okay.
So C deletes that condition 63, which is that requirement.
I see. So that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Wish to close, councillor? No. Put the motion. All those in favour? You don't get two votes on it, councillor. That motion is carried. There are no confidential items as usual. Just for noting, everyone, we have received the What If Aussie for Travel Best Main Street in Australia for Hastings Street award with a letter. It says, "Dear Mayor Wellington, my team and I would like to officially congratulate you, your team and Noosa community for Hastings Street's win as the best main street in Australia," etc., etc., etc. On behalf of the What If team. There we go. We might have to share this with Tourism Noosa and swap week by week. We'll keep it on the shelf.
And perhaps the Hastings Street Association.
Yeah, and the HSA as well. Yeah. All right. That concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance, everyone. Meeting closed.
Thank you.